Thank you everyone for joining us today. It is our Sloat Garden presentation on creating a fall entrance planter. Right now, I am Taylor. I'll be your moderator. And behind the camera, we have Dan Alexander, and our amazing presentator is Jen Strobel, who's going to go into all of this stuff we need to know about creating a nice fall entrance plot. So I'm going to pass it over to her. Thank you, Jen.
Hi everyone, thanks Taylor. We're getting fancy for this webinar. If you've joined us before, this is a new format that we're trying, and so we're hoping that it's going to work. But what I thought would be fun to do is sort of a PowerPoint presentation first, and then I'll do a live demonstration after. I imagine that this will last about a half hour. I love this topic. Obviously, containers are my specialty. I've planted a ton of containers, and this is the time of the year, like Taylor said, where we're gearing up for the holidays, we're gearing up for guests. We want our home to look nice and inviting and whatnot. And the entrance containers, I really think, can set the tone for that. So I just thought I'd share some tips with you and some different combinations, and hopefully that'll help give you some ideas. Okay, so the components of an entrance pot. I really think that with an entrance container, more than any other container, it's important to sort of have a thriller. There's an equation with containers that's thriller, filler, spiller. I don't necessarily always do that in just a general container, but I think with an entrance, it's just kind of nice to have something tall, right, on the side of the door. And so I think it's important to have a thriller. What I always encourage people to do for an entrance container for their thriller is something that's evergreen. So you don't need to change around the big thing every season. So you have just this thing that will be there, be a foundation for your container, and you can change up the surrounding plants and whatnot to fit each season. So it makes it a little bit more manageable. The filler can be seasonal color, it can be perennials. Again, that's an opportunity to just sort of play around with different combinations seasonally. And the spiller, the same thing. So that can be something that's perennial or seasonal. And I think it's just a fun way to play around with the plants. All right, next one. So what's nice about the thriller is that it's an opportunity to set the tone for what you want for your home. So whether it's contemporary, traditional, formal, farmhouse, whatever that feeling is, I think the thriller really can convey that. So in this picture, for example, these are both the same urn. On one urn, I did a traditional boxwood for a centerpiece. And then the other one, I did an aloe. So both of them have the same container, but each have an entirely different feel to them. And I just wanted to show that to give you an idea of how that can really affect the tone of the plant or the container. Okay, next slide. Another thing to consider, and I don't know if this is sort of self-explanatory or whatnot, but it wasn't for me. I didn't do this at first, but the more containers I did and the more entrance containers I did, I really realized that when you mirror the plants, it tends to work out better. So then the plants just really frame the entranceway more than if you do the exact recipe in each container. Does that make sense? So if you look at this container or this entrance, you can see that the plants, if you go from each side in, I did the same sort of combination as you're going into the doorway there. So I really think that that's an opportunity to frame the entrance. I did want to say something about color, container color with this picture, because I love it. I'm obsessed with it. The door is this gorgeous purple color, and we chose these sort of like golden brown pots. So again, with your containers is you can decide whether or not you want to make an impact with color. If you want to pull out any, you know, this client had this doormat there that had those gold tones in it. If you want to pull out those tones, this is a really good opportunity to look at whatever container color that you're choosing, or you can also decide that you want to go more neutral. And that's a nice look too. So think about that with your container. Okay, and then the next slide, I just wanted to, you know, this is not what I think about sort of holiday containers, holiday pots. I think we've done a couple classes like this, but generally containers, I think, need to be assessed every 4 to 6 months. With holiday containers, I think it's a little bit more short term. I mean, we've got a few different holidays in a row, and we want a fresh look for each holiday. So I think, you know, think about it in 3 to 4 weeks, just kind of making it different, whether it's, you can get some cut greens. So I have some like grasses and things that you can consider playing with some cut greens and berries and things like that. And then transition into the, you know, Christmas season. You can do ornaments or little Christmas lights or whatever, you know what I mean? So just kind of thinking outside the box and what other components you can add. Okay, materials list. Obviously pick out your container. Usually for entrance pots, there's not a ton of room. So the containers that I picked out for demonstration are kind of more tall and narrow, but it depends on your entranceway and what you feel works best in that space. And then keeper stopper screens are, everybody asks me when I do containers if I use gravel at the bottom of them. I don't, unless I want to weight down the container. What I like using is the keeper stopper screens, and I just put that over the drainage hole, and then I fill the whole thing with soil, and that gives more space for the roots, and the plants tend to live longer. They're able to stretch out more, so you just really maximize the space in the container. So the keeper stopper screen, potting soil, or if you're doing a cactus arrangement, then you would use cactus mix. Sure Start fertilizer is a transplant food that I use in every container. And I'll show you how to do it when I do the demonstration, but it's just really good to mix that into the soil. And then some sort of top dressing, I think, is nice, especially for an entrance pot. It really gives that sort of designery finished feel. So look at the different mosses that are available. There's tons of different colors and whatnot. And that's also an opportunity to really make a different statement with your container. And gravel too, you can use gravel. And then plants, of course, there's tons of plants. Okay. Any questions on that before I do the demonstration? No?
No, I don't think at the moment. But I really like the slide that had both the thriller and the spiller, or the two thrillers next to each other. I think that was a really nice way of showing the very different kind of plants you can go into. And I'm really excited to showing the plants you have in front of you, because you have a wide variety and wide range, and really shows that you can really kind of go very interesting and crazy and bring them together, or you can have a very nice design. So it was very good presentation there. And I will yeah, leave it to you.
Awesome. Okay, good. So we did it. We did the PowerPoint part of the class. I picked out a ton of plants, and you know, I think I might have gone a little overboard, but it's okay. But I did want to show a couple different things. Obviously, the containers, like I was saying, you know, the sort of tall and narrow. I picked out some thrillers. So this is maidenhair fern, and then, or mother fern, sorry. And this is a type of dietes, which is more of a grassy look. I do have a boxwood over here, which is a really traditional look. Another thing I picked out, this is a Daphne. So another thing to consider is fragrance. If you want to have any fragrance by your entrance, that's a nice touch. So the Daphne would be fragrant. You could also do some kind of jasmine. And so that can be nice. And then we do have these cute little, this is a lavender topiary, and we have the same thing in rosemary. So this is a really sweet little, if you don't have a ton of space, you can still have that kind of like formal entryway with a bit of fragrance. Tons of plants right now. I picked out a lot of things that are colorful. So we have calendula, Iceland poppies, feverfew, the primrose, mums, of course, cyclamen, nemesia. I mean, a bunch of yummy color. And then spillers, I have some succulents. This is string of dolphins. I have Lismachia, which is creeping Jenny. These, everybody loves these string of pearls. That's a fun little thriller. This over here is called glaucoma. And that you can see obviously spills out super nice too. So yeah, tons of fun stuff to work with. Oh, and I did also pick out some tillandsias because these are kind of fun too. You can tuck them into a container. You can, you know, through Halloween and whatnot, you can set in a pumpkin. So just like I said, think outside the box. I wanted to show a couple things too really quick, and then I'll plant a pot. But we do have these, another thing to consider, because containers sometimes are hard to, especially at an entrance pot, sometimes it's hard to get irrigation to them. And if you're hand watering it, sometimes it's not always the easiest. So one thing to consider is just a plastic insert that you just drop in. You can take this out, water it. You can also take this out and bring it to the nursery and we can plant it for you. So it makes it a little bit more portable. And then we also have these little shelves that if you want to do something like this plastic pot, or even just reduce the size, if you have a really large container and you want to reduce the volume of what you need to plant, this just sort of makes the bottom of the pot more shallow. Does that make sense? Okay, so it just creates a shelf inside the pot that you can plant on. So a couple little hacks that you can use. So I did want to take, I wanted to ask a question before I started planting, and you can answer by raising your little hand in Zoom. But I want to see, do you want me to do a sun pot or a shade pot? So if you want to see a sun pot, raise your hand.
Yeah, we have a fair bit of sun pot hands going up.
We do? Okay. So, and then who wants to see shade?
Well, it looks like Jen, it's about on an even scale. So I think it comes down to you. I think it's really actually interesting how I think maybe doing a sun pot. It seems like maybe that was a little bit more.
Do a sun pot?
Yeah, you can always talk about both of them. I think it's really nice that you have such a wide variety of plants in front of you, and everything you have in front of you, we have in our stores. We've been bringing all these in. I mean, it's fall time, but we have flowers. We have all these plants in front of us that we can use.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll plant it, and if I do have time, I'll do a quick shade pot too. We'll just see. So anyway, I love this color pot. Love it. It's called Jade. Let me get it. I already filled it with soil because it was kind of hard for me to deal with this with the bag of soil and whatnot. So I did already fill it with some soil. But I did want to show you the keeper stoppers come like this. They come in a circle, and typically I quarter them. So you only need a little wedge there to cover the drainage hole. The pack, this is like, I think 5 screens you get. So, I mean, this lasts a long time if you quarter it. And then I put in the slope potting soil. The bag looks like this. Yeah. And I put it in at the level, where when I set in the plants, I want to reserve about a 1/2 inch or so from the top of the container to the soil, just to have room for the water, so the water doesn't run off the side. Okay. And then this is the Sure Start fertilizer. And this is good. This needs to make contact with the roots of the plant. And so I put this in before I put anything else, and I just kind of like dust it in. I'd say like it's like powdering a donut. You don't dump a pile of it. Okay. And then for entrance pots, usually we're just seeing them from one direction, right? Like coming up to the door. And so your arrangement, think of the tall thing in the back versus other containers where you might do that in the center. I'm going to do this grass. And this is for sun. And one thing that I also get questions on is, do I break up the roots of the plant when I put it in containers? I don't really worry about that too much in containers. I mean, this one's pretty compacted, so it's okay to do that. But my theory on this is that the reason to do this when you're planting in the ground is that the plant sort of stretches out and unfurls quicker and fills out the ground space faster. I feel like if you don't do that in a container, that the plant sort of unfurls slower and it might last longer in a container. I don't know if this is true, but I planted hundreds of containers over 20 some years and it works. So you just take that for what it is. So yeah, there's that. And then in terms of picking out the color, I mean, you can go tonal and have a lot of sort of this like blue gray tone around it. So that can be really pretty, or you can punch it out with a bunch of different colors. So I'm just filling this around here because the plants I'm going to put in are smaller than this first plant. So I just want to make sure that the soil is at the right level before I start setting in the plants.
Yeah, I find that as a really helpful tip that not everyone realizes is when you're putting plants in, if you put the taller one first or the one that has the larger root ball, it needs to be lower, and then you kind of need to bring up the soil so everything else is not sunken in too far.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're gonna fill in too around everything, but yeah, it's good to start with the biggest root ball. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Dan's reminded me. Do another little sprinkle of Sure Start for this level. Okay, so I really like Nemesia. It's this one here. This also can have a little bit of a fragrance to it, so that's nice to put, like I said, by the front door. We have another one. If any of you have joined our classes before with me doing pots, one thing that you'll find out is that I really don't like to wait for a container to grow in. I want it to be full to start. And so everything I plant shoulder to shoulder, it's just, nobody wants to wait for it to grow in. I don't. These are Iceland poppies, which are so cute. With these, I just squeeze the container and it just pops out.
Jen, I had a question on the name of the large plant. I believe it's a deities.
Yeah,
Um,
bicolor.
yeah, the bicolor. It's actually a really cool plant because although it looks very grassy right now, it is a perennial and it does shoot up flowers in the springtime. So it's a plant that will actually flower for you later, even though it is more of just like its large leafy growth right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can flower for a long time too. And these are pansies. Pansies are super seasonal. Violas I have two. I love these guys. Super cute. Do some orange. This is the calendula. Yes, what's it looking like up in there? Okay. Yeah. Let's do one of these. So ornamental cabbage. It's got a super cool look to it. That. See, we still have more space, right, Dan?
Oh, much more space. Fill it up, Jen.
Okay. So I'm gonna put in these dolphins. And you can get them. A lot of times they come in these 6-inch pots. And I'm just taking off the hanger. And then you can take some out of the container and just rip this apart. I'll probably get 3 or 4 plants out of this. Literally just rip it. So then I'm able to push it in. Look at, isn't that, it's like an instant, see, isn't that nice?
Instant spiller.
Instant spiller, and it just looks super designery all of a sudden just by adding that.
Yeah.
I might do.
And what you just did there, that it does make a lot of people nervous, especially when they're first doing their planting, is taking apart a plant.
Yep.
But I think
Don't
can
be
you maybe speak
nervous.
on like what plants you can maybe do that with, or how you do approach that if like from one to another?
So I would say the best in terms of like what plants you can do that with, you just kind of look at the base of the plant. Let me see if I can find, so like for example, this succulent, see how there's multiple sort of like rooted pieces coming out of the base? Does that help illustrate it? So really I could take this, and each one of these little things can be like a new plant. Just rip it like that.
Yeah, and especially
Yeah.
succulents are so sturdy and they're very easy to do this. Lots of other plants can do this as well, but it's those ones that have a stalk that has its own root structure going into the soil. If you can pull it apart and have a root structure on it, it's generally okay.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, it doesn't work. I mean, it's not a big deal. You can always experiment. And you'll learn from the experimentation. But I just really love having a good spiller. Okay. And I'm just gonna add one more thing, then I'll be done. This is alyssum. And this is just this is kind of a filler spiller, a dual performer. And it's just a way to like soften up around the edge here. You see how I'm planting them all filled? I mean, I'm really stuffing in the plants. No.
You're stuffing the plants so close together that you don't have to worry about adding more soil on top.
No,
basically.
yeah, true. I mean, I will go back and I'll kind of poke around and see, like, I'll probably need to add some soil in the back. But yeah, how about that for an entrance spot? Yeah. Let's see what it looks like. If we like, can you look at that? You can throw a pumpkin in. And that just gives a little punch of color too. Okay, what do we think? Any question? Okay.
We were answering some questions as we were going through. I guess a question that I know that many people might have, or just as you talked about before, because we're filling this one up so much, I think it's good to indicate that this is a entrance plant that is for immediate color and for show stoppingness that happens right away. And it's something that can grow in, of course, but you are packing it nice and tight because you want to immediately look good for your entrance.
Totally. I mean, this pot as it is will be fine for several months. But you know, it's like I was saying, it's like you do want a full look to start, and then you can kind of you know, maybe, well, obviously we'll take out the pumpkin. Maybe this is gonna be too orange going into like the Christmas season. Stuff like that. I would say, you know, that's the type of thing you might want to swap out. Even the cabbage might be too sort of fall going into winter. So just thinking about that, as long as we have these sort of perennial plants that'll keep going, the spiller will keep going, this grass will keep going, the nemesia. So you can just like play around with that. I was gonna put a little bit of more. But you won't really see it that much. I can see it in the back here. But again, this is a way to kind of finish it off. Make it look really professional. I like the Spanish moss a lot. It's natural. It's kind of stringy.
How about a little moss under the pumpkin?
Yeah. Yep. Good call, Dan. You've been sticking them. You can do that. There, we even put it into Landia. How about that? Look at that. Yeah. So in the Tillandsia, if you do that, it's not sitting on anything. You wouldn't want it to touch any dirt. But that's kind of a fun ad. All right. Does anyone have any questions? Should I do a shade one?
Yeah, I think let's talk a little bit about shade. You don't have to go through the whole thing if you don't want to, but let's talk about the different plants that you maybe choose and why they're, you know, a little bit different than these ones and maybe some similarities too.
Okay. Let's kind of walk through the palette here. So this is shade. Obviously, there's a lot of different ferns that are really pretty evergreen centerpieces. This is shade. This is the creeping Jenny. You know, it's just a really nice look against the container. The succulents are part sun or bright shade. So you can really do a ton of succulents. I thought this was kind of cool because that like picked up that orange there. That's a jade. And then there's other succulents. You can contrast it. Like if you have like a brighter color pot, doing something like a blue to contrast that orange is kind of pretty. And then Bacopa is a super common, a lot of people like this plant. That's a super common sort of ground cover / spiller. And it comes in white, purple, and pink flowers. And the primrose. A lot of times the yellow primrose is kind of fragrant, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And then the cyclamen, of course. You see how all these things, like, even just with one plant, just gives the container a different feel a little bit. So just playing around with it is kind of nice. The cyclamen is a bulb. So theoretically, this could come back again next year. It's not super reliable, but it's possible. And then this is also a really yummy plant this time of year. This is a heuchera, and it comes in all kinds of colors, but it has that really lush look to it that you can play around with.
Yeah, they make really good spiller or really good fillers. They can even make a thriller if you have the different kind of pot too.
Yeah.
I like what you're showing is that, and generally in shade pots, we usually think of are a little bit more on the green side. There are a lot more green plants or foliage in our shade sections, but there's a lot of color as well, both in foliage as well as some flowers. So it's a fun one to play around with, even to kind of create a different kind of vibe in your shadier area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just even in the garden as a design element, if you have shady areas, I mean, putting in like a fun bright pot like this or a white pot or something like that, I mean, that's an opportunity to add just another element to a shady area. It was just another side note. So
Yeah, and I think one of the main questions that we have, which would I think help out with as you're coming to the end of making your pots, and the next step is how do you find yourself watering them? And can you maybe talk about both hand watering and then if anyone has those drip systems, maybe just like a quick like note on what that would work like.
sure. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I do want to say something really quick about saucers.
Mm.
So I'm anti-saucer, and the reason is because a lot of times what can happen, especially in a situation like an entrance pot, is that you water the planter and then there's a bunch of water that's just sitting there in the saucer, and it's basically like the plants are just have like consistently wet feet. And that's a quick way that can rot out the plants. And so if you need a saucer for whatever reason, what I would suggest is lifting up the planter in the saucer. So, and you can use like gravel or pot feet or whatever, bricks, something to just lift it up. So then we know that the water's flushing through the container instead of pooling at the base of it. Another thing about saucers is people often use them because they think that if they don't have the saucer that it's going to stain any decking or concrete or whatnot. The thing is if the saucer is sitting directly on the concrete or the decking, that's going to stain too. The stain comes from lack of air circulation. So if you don't need a saucer, what I would suggest is just lifting up the container either with, the pot feet, or we have little sort of plastic X's that can fit underneath the container and just lift it up. You don't even see it. But that's a way to create that air circulation so you don't get that staining. And then you still see that the container is draining through. And then in terms of how often to water, containers are the same as the ground in the sense that it's better to water less frequently, but make sure that the water is going through the container. And so if you're just pouring like a cup of water on the container every day as you're leaving for work or whatever, that's not going to be great.
Or the rest of your coffee.
Or your coffee, yeah, totally. So, I would say 3 times a week is a reasonable number. That might sort of change depending on if you have like a really windy area, a really sunny area, or whatever. But I think 3 times a week is a reasonable expectation, and just making sure that the 3 times a week, the water you're seeing coming out the bottom of the pot. So then we just know that it's going all the way through.
Yeah, definitely. I like how you're saying where you want to make sure that it's nice and hydrated. You don't want to let it just be a little bit of water every once in a while. It won't spread her out enough, and some of the roots will start dying away, and you'll have some some dieback. So a full hydration. I sometimes suggest going slowly around in the circle. Like the slower you are, sometimes the water kind of separates or diffuses out a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's great.
And then I had someone asking about the drip irrigation with the pipe systems. We're not super we haven't done that with our little planters here. But if you have a drip system that comes up through the bottom hole, you can have the pipe going to the from the bottom to the very top, and then some emitters at the top, and then making sure you set them at the proper watering cycle that it gets enough water, you know, either like once a week or twice a week or something like that. And just letting it water itself. And then checking on it. Always, if you ever have a drip system, always check on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the same thing with the drip. So a drip system, it would be 3 times a week for 20 minutes. So that should be sufficient amount to, and that's assuming that there's like a circle of emitters or whatnot that's just evenly distributing around the container. I have mixed feelings about the irrigation coming up the drainage hole. I've done it before, and I understand that that's a way to sort of hide the irrigation. But if there's a way that it can come up the side, I feel better about it. Just because I think sometimes it can plug up the drainage hole. We don't know if there's any leaks in that irrigation because it's buried in the soil, so that's hard to determine. So it just feels like it's kind of easier if you can come up over the back of the pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Is there any last little tips or tricks you want to throw out to the world before we end today, Jen?
Oh gosh. To the world, I would just say, you know, I just really encourage you to play around with it. I think that one thing about gardening is that and I've talked about this before, but I think that there can be an intimidation factor, and you're worried that, you know, something might not work or whatnot. And the thing is really just, you know, the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work. And experience has been my best teacher. I still kill plants. We all kill plants. It happens. But the thing is, you learn from it either way. So especially with holiday planters, you know, this could just be a fun thing to go out, even if you have kids and we all, you know, everybody picks out a flower and you just try it and see what works. And you know, decorate it, pumpkins and whatnot. Just have fun with it and experiment. And it'll be a nice conversation piece for your holiday gathering. So yeah.
That sounds very nice. Well, thank you very much for the presentation and the nice showing of all the plants that we have available to us and ways to put them together. Thank you, Dan, for the filming. And thank you everyone for joining us today for the live recording. And if you're watching it in the future, thank you for checking out all of our other content that we have on our website as well as our YouTube page. So lots of stuff out there to look at.
Thanks. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.